So as we move forward in working in geometry, we start to work a little bit more with lines and not as much in planes, but we do have a little bit here to mention on planes. But most of the stuff we're going to be dealing with is more with lines. So one things we have is this line one and line two are parallel lines. So we know that parallel lines have no points in common and they're in the same plane. So and they don't intersect. They're just the same distance from each other. So most of the time we just kind of call parallel lines like railroad tracks. They just run equal distance from each other. And since these are lines, they do this forever. Intersecting lines share a common point. So they cross each other at one point. So that's intersecting lines. Parallel planes, notice how that's when planes don't touch. So like this bottom surface and this top surface will never touch. So these are what we call parallel planes. And then we have what's called intersecting planes, planes that share an intersection point. And notice that the intersection point of a plane is actually a line. So notice that there's this line. So notice that where these two planes touch, the intersection is actually a line. So keep that in mind. And, a lot of times when I look at that, it's like turning the page into a book. So like the page of a book is a plane, and the binding part is where they intersect that line. Skew lines are lines that are not in the same plane, so they'll never intersect each other. So they're in different planes altogether. So again, skew lines do not intersect and they're in different planes. So that one's the one that's kind of unusual. The rest of these we're probably familiar with. So when it comes to spaces, we have one-dimensional space, two-dimensional space, and three-dimensional space. 1D, 2D, and 3D. So one-dimensional space basically means we're dealing with a line. Two-dimensional space, we're talking about a flat space, so like a surface. So a plane or a piece of paper. So again, a tabletop is two-dimensional. A lot of times when you go to the movie, it's kind of interesting. The movie screen is 2D, but it feels like the picture is 3D. Now, three-dimensional is when you actually have depth. So if I'm at a movie theater, when I have those special glasses, that's when the film actually comes off the screen and actually has depth to it. So three-dimensional is kind of our world. We can keep it as simple as a box or a classroom. The space that we live in is three-dimensional. So those are the main types of space that we'll deal with. 1D, 2D, and 3D. So working with angles, this is the big one here, angles. So an angle is formed when two rays share a common endpoint. The common endpoint many times is going to be called this vertex. So there may be another word that you may not be familiar with. So when you have a ray sharing an endpoint with another ray, this sharing common endpoint is referred to as the vertex of the angle. The two rays themselves are called the sides of the angle. So if I call this point A and this point B, and this A and maybe we'll call this C, notice that this ray AB becomes one side of the angle, ray AC becomes the other side of the angle. So we have the vertex and the two sides. Now angles are measured in degrees. So what we're talking about is how far do we rotate from side AC to side AB. So this here is going to be in form of some type of a degree. So when you get into angles, we're talking about rotation. So again, the angle typically is the opening between the two rays, typically is how it's defined. So if I look at an example of, again, of an angle can be named by its vertex. So I can call this angle A. It can also be described by the three letters, but notice how here, if B is in the middle, this is different. So if B is in the middle, it's got to be the vertex. So angle ABC, notice here, B's got to be the vertex. So A could be this side on this ray, and C can be on this ray here. So notice how B is the vertex. So angle ABC. So if you have three letters, the vertex point has to be the middle letter. And then the A and C could be interchangeable. So you could have also said angle CBA. That would still be the same angle as ABC. And again, the angle itself is the rotation. How many degrees is it from side BC to side AB? So we're getting into that rotation of angles here.